Christmas Eve, a time for miracles, joy, and coming home. But at 30,000 feet, the only thing colder than the blizzard raging outside was the heart of the man in the cockpit. He looked at a woman, tired, dressed in a simple hoodie, and sitting in a seat he decided she didn't deserve, and made a choice that would cost him everything. He saw her skin, he saw her clothes, and he thought he saw a nobody. He didn't know he was looking at the woman who signed his paychecks. He was about to learn that in the game of power, the quietest player in the room is often the one holding all the aces. The snow was falling so hard over Aspen-Sarpitkin County Airport that the runway lights looked like distant drowning stars. It was Christmas Eve, the kind of night where the air bites at your exposed skin and the world feels suspended in a white, frozen breath. Adele Vance pulled her oversized grey hoodie tighter around herself. She was exhausted, not the kind of tired you get from a long run or a missed night of sleep, but a bone-deep weariness that comes from 14 months of fighting a hostile takeover, navigating 3 federal investigations, and finalizing the merger of Vance AI with a European robotics giant. She was worth $42 billion. She was currently the 6th richest woman in the world. And right now, all she wanted was to close her eyes and wake up in her grandmother's house in Charleston before the turkey was carved. She walked across the tarmac, the wind whipping her braided hair against her cheeks. She carried no luggage. Her assistants had sent everything ahead 2 days ago. She clutched only a battered leather tote bag that contained a laptop worth more than most houses and a half-eaten bag of pretzels. The jet waiting for her was a Gulfstream G700, a sleek silver bullet of a machine that she had purchased 3 months ago through a shell company, Nebula Aviation. She hadn't even stepped foot inside it yet. To the crew, she was just a name on a manifest E. Vance. To the world, she was a titan of industry. To the freezing wind in Aspen, she was just another shivering body trying to get out of the cold. Adele climbed the stairs, her boots clanking softly on the metal. She expected the warmth of the cabin, the smell of leather, maybe a glass of champagne. What she didn't expect was the wall of silence that hit her the moment she ducked her head inside. Standing in the galley, checking a manifest on an iPad, with the air of a man inspecting troops before battle, was the pilot. Captain Marcus Sterling was a man who looked like he had been manufactured in a factory that built airline captains. He was tall with silver fox hair, perfectly gelled into submission, a jawline that could cut glass, and a uniform so pressed it looked sharp enough to draw blood. He was a legend in the private aviation sector, or at least he told everyone he was. He had flown Saudi princes, Russian oligarchs, and Hollywood royalty. He believed that the air up here above the clouds belonged to a certain class of people. He looked up as Adele entered. His blue eyes performed a quick, brutal scan. He saw the fraying hem of her grey hoodie. He saw the comfortable, worn-out sneakers. He saw the lack of jewelry, the lack of makeup, and the dark skin that in his experience usually belonged to the cleaning crew or the nanny, not the principal passenger. He didn't smile. He didn't nod. He simply blocked the aisle. "Deliveries go to the rear cargo hold," Sterling said, his voice a smooth, practiced baritone that lacked any warmth. "And you're late. We're wheels up in 20 minutes. Adele blinked, the warmth of the cabin fogging her glasses slightly. She took them off and wiped them on her sleeve. "Excuse me." "The catering," Sterling said, snapping his fingers as if waking a child. "Or the cleaning. Whichever agency sent you, tell them we don't have time for a full wipe down. Just grab the trash from the cockpit and get off. My passenger is arriving any minute." Adele stopped wiping her glasses. She put them back on and looked Sterling dead in the eye. The fatigue was still there, but a small, cold spark lit up in her chest. "I'm not the caterer," Adele said, her voice quiet but steady. "And I'm not the cleaning crew. I'm the passenger." Sterling let out a sound that was half laugh, half scoff. He looked past her out the open door, as if expecting the real passenger to materialize from the snow. "Right. And I'm Santa Claus. Look, miss, I don't know how you got past security at the gate. I'll be having a word with the FBO about that. But you need to leave. Now. This is a $45 million aircraft, not a Greyhound bus." "I know how much it costs," Adele said. She stepped forward, expecting him to move. "I paid for it." Sterling didn't budge. In fact, he puffed his chest out, occupying more space. The flight attendant, a young woman named Sarah, who looked terrified, peeked out from the galley behind him. She opened her mouth to speak, perhaps to check the manifest, but Sterling silenced her with a raised hand. "Stop lying," Sterling hissed, his professional veneer cracking to reveal the ugly prejudice underneath. "I know who chartered this flight. Nebula Aviation. That's a corporate holding firm for high-net-worth individuals. I have flown for the CEO of shell companies before. They wear bespoke suits. They carry Birkin bags. They do not look like—" He waved a hand vaguely at her entire existence. "You." "Check the manifest, Captain," Adele said. She was too tired for anger, but her patience was thinning like the air at this altitude. "The name is Vance. E. Vance." Sterling snatched the iPad from the counter. He jabbed at the screen aggressively. "I have the manifest right here. Passenger Vance. Sole passenger." He looked up, a triumphant sneer curling his lip. "It doesn't say Adele. It doesn't say Miss. It just says Vance. For all I know, you stole that bag from the real Vance in the terminal." "My ID is in my pocket," Adele said, reaching for her zipper. "Don't reach for anything," Sterling barked, stepping back as if she were pulling a weapon. "I'm not looking at your fake ID. I've been in this industry for 30 years. I can spot a fraud from the tarmac. You're a stowaway or a groupie trying to snag a ride with a billionaire, or maybe you're just confused. But you are not sitting in my cabin." "Your cabin," Adele repeated, her eyebrows raising. "My ship, my rules," Sterling said. "I am responsible for the safety and integrity of this vessel, and I will not have it compromised by allowing unauthorized persons to loiter in the VIP section." Adele took a deep breath. She could fire him right now. She could pull out her phone, call the head of Nebula Aviation, who was actually her personal attorney, David Thorne, and have Sterling escorted off the plane by the very security he was threatening her with. But then she looked at the snow piling up on the wing outside. If she fired the pilot, they would need a replacement. On Christmas Eve, in a blizzard, finding a qualified G700 captain would take hours, maybe days. She would miss Christmas morning with her grandmother. She would miss the one thing she had been looking forward to for months. She needed to get to Charleston. "Fine," Adele said, her voice turning into steel. "You don't believe me? You think I'm—" "What staff? I think you're a nuisance," Sterling said. "But if you are staff, if you are, say, the nanny sent ahead to prep the cabin, you can sit in the jump seat in the back, near the lavatory, out of sight. When the real Mr. Vance arrives, you stay quiet. If you make a sound, I'll divert to Kansas City and dump you there." Adele stared at him. The disrespect was so absolute, so breathtakingly arrogant, that it was almost fascinating. He didn't just want her off the plane. He wanted her to know her place. He wanted to exert power over someone he deemed beneath him. "The jump seat," Adele said flatly. "Take it or leave it," Sterling said, checking his heavy gold watch. "You have 10 seconds before I call the airport police and have you dragged out into the snow." Adele looked at the plush, cream-colored leather of seat 1A, the seat she had specifically designed with extra lumbar support for her bad back. Then she looked at the cramped folding crew seat near the rear galley next to the toilet. She thought of the warm fire in Charleston. She thought of her grandmother's smile. "I'll take the seat," Adele said. Sterling smirked. It was the smile of a man who had won a game he didn't realize he was playing alone. "Smart choice. Now move. The principal passenger will be here any second, and I don't want him smelling." He sniffed the air theatrically. Poverty. Adele walked past him. As she squeezed by, she caught the scent of his cologne, expensive, overpowering, and masking the smell of stale coffee. She walked to the back of the plane, past the mahogany tables, past the crystal decanters, past the bed made up with Egyptian cotton sheets. She sat in the small, uncomfortable jump seat by the rear exit. Sarah, the flight attendant, hurried over looking anxious. "Miss, can I get you a water or a blanket?" "No, thank you, Sarah," Adele said, buckling the utilitarian strap across her chest. She pulled her phone out. "Just let me know when we're in the air." "I'm so sorry about him," Sarah whispered, glancing toward the cockpit, where Sterling was laughing into his headset, likely boasting to ground control. He's very particular about protocol." "Don't apologize for him," Adele said softly. She opened her phone and typed a quick text message to David Thorne. "Do not pick up if the pilot calls. I'm on board. We handle this in Charleston. Prepare the termination papers." She hit send. "He thinks the owner is coming," Adele said to Sarah. "Let him wait." Up in the cockpit, Captain Sterling watched the tarmac. 5 minutes passed. 10. The snow was getting heavier. He checked the time. "Where the hell is this Vance guy?" he muttered. He keyed the intercom. "Ground, this is N700 EV. We're still holding for the principal. Any sign of a limousine or black car on the ramp?" "Negative, Captain." The tower crackled back. "Ramp is clear. Visibility dropping. If you don't depart in 15 minutes, we're closing the runway for de-icing. That's a 2-hour delay." Sterling cursed. He couldn't wait 2 hours. He had a dinner date in Charleston with a woman who thought he owned the plane. He stormed out of the cockpit and marched to the back of the plane. Adele was reading an e-book on her phone, her legs crossed in the cramped space. "Where is he?" Sterling demanded, towering over her. "You said you were with the passenger. Where is Mr. Vance?" Adele didn't look up from her screen. "I never said I was with him. I said I am Vance." Still sticking to that delusion. Sterling grabbed the headrest of the seat next to her, leaning in close. "Listen to me. We are losing our slot. If your boss isn't here in 5 minutes, we are leaving. And since I can't fly an empty plane without a principal on board, according to company policy, I'm going to cancel the flight. You'll be stuck here in Aspen, alone." "If you cancel the flight," Adele said, finally looking up, her eyes dark and calm, "you will be in breach of contract, and you won't like the penalty." "I am the captain," Sterling shouted, his face turning red. "I decide who flies and who doesn't. I am not waiting for some rich brat who can't tell time." He turned to Sarah. "Close the door. We're leaving." Sarah's eyes went wide. "But Captain, the passenger isn't—" "I said close the damn door," Sterling roared. "We're flying empty to Charleston, to reposition. I'm not getting stuck in this blizzard. And she," he pointed a trembling finger at Adele, "stays in the jump seat. If she moves past the wing, Call me. I'll restrain her myself. Sarah scrambled to seal the main cabin door. The hydraulics whined, shutting out the howling wind. The cabin pressurized with a soft hiss. Sterling glared at Adele one last time. You're lucky I'm generous. You're getting a free ride. But don't think for a second you're welcome here. When we land, you're going straight to the police for fraud. He spun on his heel and marched back to the cockpit, slamming the door behind him. Adele watched him go. She felt the vibration of the engines, spooling up Rolls-Royce Pearl 700 engines, powerful and quiet. She had approved the purchase order for them herself. As the plane began to taxi, jerking slightly on the icy tarmac, Adele Vance leaned her head back against the hard plastic of the jump seat. A small, sad smile played on her lips. Captain Sterling thought he was flying an empty plane. He thought he was in charge. He had no idea that he had just ordered the owner of the aircraft to sit in the servants' quarters. And he certainly had no idea that the police waiting in Charleston wouldn't be there for her. The jet roared down the runway and lifted into the dark, snowy sky. The turbulence was immediate and violent, shaking the coffee pot in the galley. But Adele didn't flinch. She just watched the lights of Aspen disappear below, thinking about the gift she was about to give Captain Sterling for Christmas. It wasn't a bonus. It was a lesson. The jet leveled off, cutting through the thin air like a silent silver needle. The seatbelt sign pinged off. Adele Vance remained in the jump seat, her legs cramped against the bulkhead. She watched as Captain Sterling emerged from the cockpit, not with the urgency of a pilot checking on his aircraft, but with the swagger of a landlord inspecting his property. He had removed his cap and unbuttoned his blazer, revealing a crisp white shirt that strained slightly against his chest. "Sarah," he barked, not even looking at the flight attendant, "get the 08 Dom Perignon on ice, and bring the caviar service, the good stuff, not the garnish." Sarah hesitated, glancing nervously at Adele in the corner. "Captain, that stock is reserved for the principal. The manifest says the plane is empty." Sterling interrupted his voice, dripping with condescension. "Mr. Vance is back in Aspen, probably passed out in a snowbank. The plane is repositioning. That means we are the principals tonight." He walked over to one of the plush reclining captain's chairs, Adele's favorite spot, and sank into it, kicking his feet up onto the ottoman. He finally turned his gaze to Adele. He looked her up and down with a mixture of amusement and disgust. "You," he said, snapping his fingers. "Since you're getting a free ride on my bird, you can earn it. Sarah is busy. Bring me a hot towel." Adele stared at him. The sheer audacity was almost impressive. "I'm not your stewardess, Captain." Sterling's eyes narrowed. "No, you're a trespasser I decided not to arrest yet. If you want to stay on this side of the cockpit door and not locked in the lavatory, you'll make yourself useful. Towel. Now." Adele stood up slowly. Her knees popped. She walked to the galley where Sarah looked at her with wide, apologetic eyes. "Please, miss, I can do it," Sarah whispered, reaching for the tongs. "It's okay, Sarah," Adele said softly, taking the hot towel from the steamer. "Let him have his moment." Adele walked back to the cabin and held out the towel. Sterling snatched it without a word, wiping his face and hands, before tossing it carelessly onto the mahogany table. A table finished with a rare wood veneer that Adele had personally selected in Milan. "You know," Sterling said, leaning back and accepting a crystal flute of champagne from Sarah. "You people are all the same. You see a jet like this and think you can just slide into the life. Do you have any idea who owns this plane?" Adele sat on the edge of the facing seat, perching precariously so as not to fully occupy it. "Why don't you tell me? Vance," Sterling said, swirling the golden liquid. Big tech money. Probably some socially awkward nerd who made an app for dog walking or something. I've never met him, but I know the type. They have zero taste. They buy these toys to feel important, but they don't know how to run them. That's why they need men like me. Men like you, Adele repeated neutrally. Gatekeepers, Sterling said, taking a sip. I keep the riffraff out. I manage the asset. Honestly, this is basically my plane. Vance just pays the fuel bill. If he walked in here right now, he probably wouldn't even know how to open the emergency exit. Adele looked at the emergency exit door. She knew exactly how to open it. She also knew that the handle had a biometric lock override, that only she and the head of security could access a feature she had patented. I heard Vance was a woman, Adele said, testing him. Sterling laughed, a sharp bark of a sound. A woman? Please. Nebula Aviation is a shark tank. No woman runs a portfolio this aggressive. It's definitely a man. Probably short balding compensates with the G700. He smirked at her. Unlike you. You're just drifting. He pulled out his phone, connecting to the onboard Wi-Fi, which cost $8,000 a month, paid for by Adele. He dialed a number on speakerphone. Hey, babe, Sterling said, his voice dropping an octave into a smooth, predatory purr. Yeah, I'm en route. Aspen was a bust. Client was a no-show. Yeah, I know. But listen, meet me at the hangar. I've got the jet to myself tonight. We can finish that bottle of Dom on the tarmac before the crew car takes me home. Yeah, bring the red dress. Adele looked out of the window. Below them, the dark tapestry of America was dotted with clusters of light. She felt a strange detachment, as if she were watching a movie about someone else's life. This man was drinking her wine, sitting in her seat, inviting a mistress to her plane, and insulting her to her face. It was the perfect storm of hubris. Captain, Sarah said, her voice trembling as she stepped into the cabin. We're getting a message from ATC. Turbulence reported ahead over Tennessee. Severe chop. Sterling waved a dismissive hand. It's Christmas Eve, Sreel. The controllers are just bored. I'll keep the ride smooth. Pour me another. Adele watched the liquid in the glass. It was already trembling. You might want to buckle up, Captain, Adele said quietly. Don't tell me my job's stowaway, Sterling sneered. Then the plane dropped 300 feet in a single second. The champagne flute didn't just spill, it launched. The crystal shattered against the ceiling, showering Marcus Sterling in vintage Dom Perignon and shards of glass. The G700 groaned, the composite frame shuddering under the impact of the air pocket. Alarms screamed from the cockpit, the autopilot disconnect wail that every pilot dreads. Sterling was thrown from the chair, slamming his shoulder hard against the bulkhead. He scrambled to his feet, slipping on the wet floor, his face a mask of sudden white-hot panic. The arrogance evaporated instantly, replaced by the primal fear of a man who had lost control. Sarah, secure the cabin, he screamed, stumbling toward the cockpit. The plane banked violently to the left. Gravity pinned Adele to her seat, but she didn't panic. Her mind shifted instantly into engineering mode. She knew the G700's flight envelope. She knew the stress tolerances of the wings. What she didn't trust was the man flying it. She unbuckled and crawled toward the cockpit. Get back in your seat, Sterling roared as he wrestled with the door handle. The angle of attack is too high, Adele shouted over the alarms. You're stalling it. Don't pull back. Push the nose down. Shut up. Sterling slammed the cockpit door in her face and locked it. Inside the cabin, chaos reigned. The lights flickered and died, replaced by the emergency floor lighting. Sarah was strapped into her jump seat, sobbing, clutching a rosary. The plane pitched down, diving to regain airspeed. The sensation of falling was sickening. Objects, magazines, the iPad, the silver tray became projectiles. Adele braced herself in the doorway of the galley. She wasn't just a CEO. She was a coder. And this plane was at its heart, a flying computer. She pulled her phone out. The Wi-Fi was still active. She opened the Nebula Aviation admin app. It was a prototype interface. She had insisted on installing a dead man's switch that allowed the owner to monitor flight telemetry in real time. She saw the data streaming in. Sterling was fighting the yoke, overcorrecting. He was panicking. The aircraft was fully capable of flying itself out of this if he would just engage the emergency stability mode, but his ego wouldn't let him trust the computer. He was trying to be a hero. "He's going to tear the wings off," Adele muttered. She tapped into the cabin intercom system via her phone, bypassing the cockpit lockout. "Sterling!" Her voice boomed through the cabin speakers, calm and authoritative. "Listen to me. Engage the EDM emergency descent mode. You are overstressing the airframe. Let the fly-by-wire handle the turbulence." "Who is that?" Sterling's voice cracked over the comms, breathless and terrified. "How are you doing that?" "It doesn't matter," Adele yelled at the ceiling speaker. "Look at your primary flight display. Your airspeed is erratic. Engage the autothrottle. Now." There was a pause. The plane shuddered violently again, a sound like a hammer hitting a metal drum. Then the engine whine smoothed out. The nose leveled. The sickening drop stopped, replaced by a steady, albeit bumpy, cruise. He had engaged the automation. Adele slumped against the galley wall, exhaling a breath she didn't know she was holding. A few minutes later, the cockpit door opened. Sterling stood there. He was disheveled, his shirt stained with wine, a small cut on his forehead, bleeding. He looked shaken, but as his eyes landed on Adele, the fear hardened back into anger. He needed someone to blame for his moment of weakness. "You hacked my system," he accused, pointing a shaking finger at her. "You interfered with a flight crew during an emergency. That is a federal crime. That is a felony." Adele stood up, brushing lint off her hoodie. "I saved your life. You were fighting the stability augmentation. You would have put us in a spin. I had it under control." Sterling lied, his face flushing red. "I was flying manually. You distracted me. You jeopardized this vessel." He stepped closer, looming over her. The fear was gone, replaced by the viciousness of a man whose ego had been bruised. He grabbed her arm, his grip painful. "Get in the back," he hissed. "I'm putting the restraints on you. You're a cyber-terrorist. I'm landing this plane in Charleston, and I'm personally handing you to the FBI. You're going to prison for a long, long time." Adele didn't struggle. She looked at his hand on her arm, then up at his eyes. "Let go of me, Marcus," she said. It was the first time she had used his first name. It sounded like a judgment. He shoved her toward the jump seat. "Sit. And if you touch a phone, if you touch a screen, I will come back here and knock you out. Do you understand? I am the law up here." Adele sat. She watched him zip-tie her hands loosely to the armrest, not tight enough to cut circulation, but enough to humiliate. He wanted her to feel powerless. "Enjoy the view," Sterling spat. "It's the last time you'll see the sky without bars across it." He went back to the cockpit. Adele waited until the door clicked shut. Then she twisted her wrist. The zip tie was cheap plastic. She could snap it if she really wanted to, but she didn't. She wanted the police to see this. She wanted the world to see exactly what Captain Marcus Sterling did to a black woman on Christmas Eve, because he couldn't believe she was anything other than a threat. She leaned her head back and closed her eyes. "Sarah," she whispered. "Yes." The flight attendant was weeping softly across the aisle. "When we land, don't say a word. Just watch." The descent into Charleston International Airport was smooth, the storm left far behind in the Rockies. Below, the city lights of Charleston glowed like scattered embers in the dark. Sterling was on the radio constantly. Adele could hear his voice through the thin bulkhead. He wasn't just calling the tower. He was calling the FBO manager, the police, and likely his date. "Level 3 threat," Sterling was saying. "Attempted hijacking of flight controls. Suspect is restrained. I want armed officers at the jet bridge. No, don't bring the stairs. I want them to come up and drag her out." He was enjoying this. He was building a narrative. He was the hero pilot who subdued the crazy stowaway who tried to crash the plane. It would cover up his error with the turbulence. It would make him a legend. The landing gear deployed with a heavy clunk. The flaps whirred. Adele looked out the window. She saw the familiar runway of KCHS. She saw the private aviation terminal. And she saw the lights. Blue and red strobe lights, lots of them. Sterling greased the landing a perfect touchdown to make up for the earlier chaos. He taxied the massive jet toward the private hangar. "Ladies and gentlemen," Sterling's voice oozed over the intercom, dripping with sarcasm. "Welcome to Charleston. For one of you, welcome home. For the other, welcome to hell." The jet came to a halt. The engines whined down. Sterling burst out of the cockpit looking triumphant. He rebuttoned his blazer, wiped the blood from his forehead, and put his cap back on. He looked every inch the distinguished captain. "Don't move," he told Adele. "The police are boarding." The main cabin door opened. Cold, humid air rushed in. 2 uniformed officers stepped onto the plane. Behind them, however, was not a SWAT team. It was a man in a bespoke navy suit holding a briefcase. He was followed by 2 large men in dark tactical gear with the insignia Nebula Security on their chests. The man in the suit was David Thorne, Adele's attorney, and the vice president of operations for her holding company. He looked furious. Sterling stepped forward, extending a hand to the police officers, ignoring David. "Officers, thank God you're here. The suspect is in the rear, restrained. She hacked the avionics. She—" "Step aside, Captain," one of the officers said, pushing past him. "What?" Sterling blinked. "No, she's back there. I have her tied up." David Thorne stepped into the cabin. He didn't look at Sterling. He looked straight at the back of the plane, where Adele sat in the jump seat, wearing a hoodie and plastic zip ties. David's face went pale. "My God!" He rushed past Sterling, pulling a pocket knife from his jacket. He knelt beside Adele and cut the ties. "Adele," David said, his voice shaking with rage. "Are you hurt?" "I'm fine, David," Adele said, rubbing her wrists. She stood up, stretching her back. Sterling turned around, confused. "Who are you? What are you doing? That woman is a criminal. You can't just release her." David Thorne stood up and turned to face Sterling. The look on his face was one of absolute cold destruction. "Captain Sterling," David said, his voice like ice. "I am David Thorne. I represent the owner of this aircraft." "Great," Sterling said, puffing his chest out. "Then you'll want to thank me. I saved your boss's plane from this lunatic. She claimed she was Vance. Can you believe that?" Sterling laughed, looking around for validation. No one laughed. The police officers were standing at attention. The security guards were glaring at him. Adele walked slowly down the aisle. She stopped right in front of Sterling. She was shorter than him, but in that moment she seemed to tower over him. "You really should read your manifests more carefully, Marcus," Adele said. "What are you talking about?" Sterling scoffed. "You're a nobody. A stowaway. Adele reached into her tote bag. She pulled out a black card, an aviation ID with a holographic chip. She held it up. It read, Adele Vance. CEO, owner. Nebula Aviation. Sterling stared at the card. He blinked. He looked at Adele's face. He looked at the hoodie. He looked back at the card. No, he whispered. That's fake. Captain Sterling. David Thorne interrupted, opening a folder he had brought with him. This is the bill of sale for the Gulfstream G700 serial number 4022. Signed by Adele Vance. And this, he pulled out another paper, is your employment contract. David ripped the contract in half. The sound was loud in the silent cabin. You are relieved of command, David said. Effective immediately. Sterling's face turned a color that matched the gray winter sky. You're Vance. I am, Adele said calmly. And you are the man who ordered me to the cargo hold, drank my champagne, invited a mistress onto my aircraft, and assaulted me. She turned to the police officers. Officers, I would like to press charges against this man for unlawful imprisonment and assault. Wait, Sterling stammered, backing up until he hit the galley counter. It was a misunderstanding. I was protecting the plane. I didn't know you were wearing a hoodie. You looked like... Like what? Adele asked, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. Say it, Marcus. What did I look like? Sterling opened his mouth, but no words came out. He looked at the police, then at David, then at Sarah. Sarah was standing by the door, and for the first time she was smiling. Get him off my plane, Adele said. Miss Vance, please, Sterling begged as the security guards grabbed his arms. I have a mortgage. I have a reputation. You can't do this on Christmas Eve. You're right, Adele said, picking up the iPad he had used to check the manifest. It is Christmas Eve. She tapped the screen, bringing up the pilot database. I'm not just firing you, Marcus. I'm blacklisting you. I'm filing a report with the FAA regarding your reckless handling of the turbulence and your failure to follow safety protocols. You won't fly a crop duster after I'm done with you. The guards dragged him toward the door. As he was hauled out into the cold Charleston night, his date in the red dress was standing on the tarmac watching. She took one look at him in handcuffs, turned around, and got back in her car. Adele stood in the doorway of her $45 million jet. She took a deep breath of the humid southern air. David, she asked. Yes, Ms. Vance. Order a car for Sarah. Send her to the best hotel in the city on my dime, and give her a Christmas bonus, $10,000. Sarah gasped. Ms. Vance, You tried to help, Adele said, smiling kindly. That matters. Adele walked down the stairs. The nightmare flight was over. But the story was just beginning. Because Adele Vance didn't just get mad. She got even. And Marcus Sterling was about to become the most famous unemployed pilot in the world. The weeks following Christmas were supposed to be quiet. Adele Vance had planned to spend January in her grandmother's sunroom drinking tea and reviewing the merger documents for her robotics firm. But Marcus Sterling had other plans. A man like Sterling doesn't fade into obscurity. He explodes. 3 days after being dragged off the tarmac in Charleston, Sterling appeared on the right angle. A popular aggressive cable news show known for spinning narratives of victimhood. He wasn't wearing his uniform, but he wore a suit that mimicked the authority of one. He looked tired, unshaven, a calculated look to garner sympathy. I was doing my job, Sterling told the host, his voice breaking with practiced emotion. I saw a threat. I saw someone who refused to identify themselves, dressed in street clothes, lurking in the back of a $45 million asset. in this day and age with security, what it is I made a command decision to secure the aircraft. And for that, for protecting her property, she destroyed me." The host nodded gravely. "And you believe this was racially motivated, that she targeted you because you're a white man in a position of authority?" "Absolutely." Sterling lied his eyes wet. "She set me up. She baited me. She wanted a viral moment. Now I'm blacklisted. 30 years of unblemished service gone. I can't even get a job flying a Cessna." The narrative took hold. Internet forums lit up. Justice. For Captain Sterling began to trend. People who didn't know a flap from a slat were suddenly experts on aviation security, calling Adele an entitled tech brat and a trap setter. Adele watched the interview from her office in Charleston. David Thorne, her lawyer, paced the room, his face red. "He's suing Adele," David said, tossing a thick legal packet onto her desk. "Wrongful termination, defamation, intentional infliction of emotional distress. He wants $50 million. He says you humiliated him in front of the police and his fiancée, that woman in the red dress." Adele picked up the lawsuit. She didn't look angry. She looked bored. "He calls her his fiancée now?" Adele asked. "On the plane he called her babe and told me he was going to finish the bottle with her." "The public doesn't know that," David warned. "They only know his version. Adele, we should settle. Not the $50 million, obviously. But give him a severance package, a non-disclosure agreement, and let him fade away. A trial will be a circus." Adele stood up and walked to the window. She looked out at the garden where her grandmother was pruning roses. "No," Adele said. "Adele, the PR hit. I don't care about the PR, David. I care about the truth. He endangered my life. He endangered Sruss's life. He endangered people on the ground. And he did it because his ego was writing checks his skills couldn't cash." She turned back to David. "He wants a circus fine. Let's give him the whole show. Did we pull the QAR data?" "The quick access recorder, yes," David said. "And the cockpit voice recorder audio. And the cabin video. Yes, the G100 creates a backup loop to the cloud server every 10 minutes. We have everything." Adele smiled, and it was the sharp, predatory smile of a woman who built $1 billion empire in a room full of men who told her no. "Don't release it yet," she ordered. "Let him go on a few more talk shows. Let him file the lawsuit. Let him swear under oath that he was a perfect pilot and I was an unruly passenger. I want him to commit to the lie completely." "And then?" David asked. "And then," Adele said, "we drop the bomb." The deposition took place 2 months later in a high-rise conference room in Atlanta. It wasn't a trial yet, but it was the decisive battleground. Sterling sat across the mahogany table, flanked by a team of lawyers working on contingency. He looked smug. He had spent the last 8 weeks being treated like a martyr by certain media outlets. He believed his own lie. The camera was rolling. "Captain Sterling," David Thorne began adjusting his glasses. "You stated in your complaint that the aircraft was under normal operating conditions and that Miss Vance violently interfered with the flight deck." "That is correct," Sterling said, leaning into the microphone. "She screamed. She banged on the door. She distracted me during a critical phase of flight." "And the turbulence?" David asked. "You described it as unforeseeable clear air turbulence." "Acts of God," Sterling said, waving a hand. "Pilots can't see air, Mr. Thorne. I handled it expertly." David nodded slowly. He looked down at his laptop. "Captain, are you familiar with the term situational awareness?" Sterling scoffed. I have 20,000 flight hours. Do not lecture me on awareness. Very well. David pressed a key on his laptop. A large screen on the wall flickered to life. It was the cabin video from the night of Christmas Eve. The room went silent. On the screen, the high-definition camera showed the cabin clearly. It showed Adele sitting quietly in the jump seat, reading. It showed Sterling strutting out of the cockpit. "Get the 08 Dom Perignon on ice," the Sterling on the screen barked. "The manifest says the plane is empty." Vance is back in Aspen, probably passed out in a snowbank. Sterling's face in the deposition room went pale. He hadn't known about the cabin cameras. Most older jets didn't record the cabin audio and video this clearly, but the G700 was a flying surveillance state. The video continued. It showed Sterling mocking Adele. It showed him drinking the champagne. "Objection!" Sterling's lawyer shouted, standing up. "This is being tool." "I'm not done," David said calmly. The video cut to the moment the turbulence hit. The plane jerked. Sterling fell. He scrambled to the cockpit. Then David played the audio from the cockpit voice recorder. CVR. Sterling. Oh God, I lost the autopilot." Adele, over intercom. "The angle of attack is too high. You're stalling it." Sterling. "Shut up. Shut up." Sterling, muttering. "I can't feel it. I don't know what it's doing." The audio was damning. It wasn't the voice of a hero. It was the voice of a panicked amateur who had become complacent. David paused the recording. "Captain, the flight data shows that you disengaged the autopilot manually to hand fly while intoxicated. Your blood alcohol level was never tested because you fled the scene, but the video clearly shows you consuming alcohol. The data shows the aircraft entered a pre-stall buffet because you pulled back too hard. Ms. Vance, using the remote telemetry app, identified the stall and talked you into engaging the emergency descent mode." David leaned forward. "She didn't distract you, Captain. She flew the plane from the jump seat because you were too busy panicking." Sterling was sweating now, profusely. He tugged at his collar. That video is doctored. That audio is out of context." "We have the time-stamped server logs," David said, "but here is the coup de grace." He slid a document across the table. "This is an affidavit from Sarah, the flight attendant. And this," David pointed to the screen, "is the footage of you zip-tying the owner of the aircraft." On screen, Sterling was seen shoving Adele into the seat. "You're a cyber-terrorist. I am the law up here." David closed his laptop. The silence in the room was heavy, suffocating. "We are counter-suing," David said, his voice hard. "Not for money. We know you don't have $50 million. We are suing for fraud. We are submitting this evidence to the FAA for an emergency revocation of your ATP certificate. And we are releasing this footage to the public to correct the defamatory statements you made on national television." Sterling's lawyer looked at his client. He saw the sweat, the fear, the undeniable truth on the screen. He started packing his briefcase. "Marcus," the lawyer whispered loud enough for everyone to hear, "you lied to me. I'm withdrawing as counsel." "You can't leave me," Sterling shrieked. "She's ruining me." "You ruined yourself," David said. "Ms. Vance gave you a chance to walk away in Charleston. You chose to make it a war. Well, Captain, you just crashed." The video went viral, but not in the way Sterling had hoped. The internet is a fickle beast, but it loves a receipt. The footage of Sterling sipping champagne and insulting a woman in a hoodie, followed by his terrified shrieking in the cockpit, became the most watched clip on YouTube for a week. The hashtags flipped instantly. Sterling. The stowaway and pilot panic replaced his support. The FAA moved faster than they had in years. Within 48 hours, Marcus Sterling's airline transport pilot license was suspended pending investigation. 2 weeks later, it was revoked permanently for gross negligence and operation of an aircraft under the influence. But the real karma hit harder than the license. 6 months later, on a humid July afternoon, Adele Vance walked through the terminal of a small regional airport in Florida. She was there to inspect a new flight school she was funding, the Vance Scholarship for Aviators, designed to help minority pilots get their flight hours without going into debt. She was dressed in a sharp blazer and slacks this time, looking every bit the billionaire CEO. She walked with David and the airport manager. "We're very excited about the simulator bay," the manager was saying. "It's state-of-the-art." "Good," Adele said. "I want to make sure the students have access to the best. No barriers." They walked past the rental car counters near the exit. Adele paused. She saw a man behind the budget rent-a-car counter. He was wearing a polyester red polo shirt that was too tight around the middle. He looked older, grayer. The silver fox hair was thinning, and the arrogant jawline was slack with exhaustion. It was Marcus Sterling. He was arguing with the customer. "Sir, I can't give you the upgrade for free. The computer won't let me." "Just do it, buddy," the customer snapped. "Don't you know who I am?" Sterling froze. The words seemed to hit him like a physical blow. "Don't you know who I am?" He looked up, tired and defeated, and his eyes locked with Adele's across the terminal floor. For a moment, the bustling airport fell away. Adele looked at the man who had tried to humiliate her, the man who had ordered her to sit by the toilet, the man who had risked her life for his ego. She expected to feel anger or triumph, but all she felt was pity. He was a man who had built his entire identity on being above others literally and metaphorically. Now he was grounded, permanently. Sterling looked at her. He recognized her instantly. He opened his mouth, perhaps to say something, perhaps to apologize, or maybe to beg. Adele didn't look away, but she didn't approach him. She simply nodded a small acknowledgement of his existence, and then turned her back. "Miss Vance," David asked, "everything okay?" "Yes, David," Adele said, continuing her walk toward the flight school, where 20 young, eager students were waiting for her students who would learn to fly with humility, skill, and respect. Everything is exactly as it should be. As they walked out the automatic doors, the sound of a jet taking off roared overhead. Adele looked up, shielding her eyes against the sun, watching the silver plane climb higher and higher into the limitless blue sky. She smiled. The sky belonged to everyone. But you had to earn your wings. The story of Adele Vance and Captain Sterling is a reminder that character is revealed not when we are comfortable, but when we have power over others. Sterling saw a hoodie and assumed weakness. He saw a black woman and assumed servitude. He failed to realize that true power doesn't need a uniform or a title to announce itself. In a world obsessed with status, Adele Vance proved that the most important seat on the plane isn't the one with the best view. It's the one occupied by the person who knows exactly who they are. Be careful who you step on during your climb. They might be the one flying the plane. If you enjoyed this story of high-altitude justice and instant karma, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a story about arrogance getting exactly what it deserves. Have you ever been judged by your appearance? Tell me your story in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.